Recently, I got a great question from one of my subscribers. In reference to one of my abstract sketches, Jackie asked, how planned or unplanned are your sketches? I think this is a great question, and so I thought today I would just do some real-time drawing and sketching and draw a similar sketch and explain my thought process and how I approach them. So I'm working on some Bristol board. I think this is great material to draw and paint on. Really smooth surface. So there's probably a different approach depending on the type of subject matter and drawing that you're doing. Obviously, that could change or affect the approach that you take. But for this one, these abstract sketches, I've been doing these for so long. I kind of mentioned this to Jackie that typically when I'm doing those abstract faces, the only real thing I'm thinking about is the fact that I have the goal of capturing some faces, right? So it's a pretty straightforward process where I just a goal of just drawing a bunch of faces and having them all connect. I want them to be geometric. I want them to interconnect. I want them to share elements. And more I've been trying to not just draw faces, but also work in animals and other objects and things that are kind of interesting to me. So like for instance with this drawing, I want to do at least one central face sort of in the middle, maybe to the lower right. I want to do an animal or two, maybe an owl or a fox. Maybe a couple other faces will be mixed in, but there's no real plan. I kind of have an idea in my head and then I just start drawing. So I literally will draw usually like a curved shape, which obviously looks like a face to me. And then I'll just start to improvise from that point on. So one thing that I think about often, anything you draw, paint, or try to create artistically and visually is technically an abstraction. You're not taking a photograph, you're not copying something exactly as you might see it in real life, and so therefore it is an abstraction. But this type of drawing is an abstraction to the extreme, so I'm like pushing it even further. So eyes and noses and faces don't really look like this, so they're being abstracted even more. So here, without even thinking, I'm just trying to put in some basic shapes. That looks kind of like a sad eye. This obviously isn't a real pupil, but I'm just thinking of, artwork I've seen, artwork I've created, and I'll deliberately do things like make sure that there's not symmetry, right? So like there may be two circles or two semicircles, but they're not exactly the same. They're distorted, and sometimes I'll even put in something completely random like a square instead of a circle, and I'm just literally playing and having fun. And I've done this again so many times that I kind of have some habits or some things that I fall back on from time to time. For instance, I know that when I draw a shape that looks kind of like this, like sort of like a leaf or a teardrop, if I just sort of flip that shape and kind of mirror it, then I almost always have sort of like this fox, rabbit, strange animal type figure. Quite often I can use that same shape in a different way to create like a bird or some other creature. So I'll just literally start doing these weird repetitions, repetitive sort of shapes until something kind of stands out to me. Here this face is already starting to connect with this shape here. So I'll kind of just see if I can make some hair or something that looks like hair. And then if the hair is going, this direction, then on the other side I'll just do something that's completely different, right? So like maybe mirror that shape or create a shape that's similar but going in a different way. I immediately look at this and I start to see this hair on this side looks like a nose, especially when it's combined with this eye. So, this face and this face are sort of sharing, what I see as a face here is starting to share elements. So I'll come over here and I'll just draw like a circle, maybe complete this shape, maybe bring it around, maybe connect this shape. So as you can see, I don't know, it's a very intuitive thing for me. And I like it because it's surprising. It's interesting. I'm not really forcing myself to stick to a plan or to get too rigid or caught up in what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doodling and having fun and not really putting any pressure on myself to make something too perfect, if you will. I'm just having a good time. So I kind of mentioned I might want to do like an owl, and I'm already starting to see sort of an owl shape, with the chin of this character. And so if I just do something like this, literally with no reference, like I honestly can't remember what owls look like. I know they have big eyes, so I might just drop in something like that. And again, I don't know if I want to get it too symmetrical, so I'll do something like that. Maybe flip it, put in some wings that aren't really wings, or just kind of triangles. And again, this may not be a very pleasing drawing. It may turn out to be like terrible. It's okay. It's the way that I've ended up. I'll show you some examples. It's just through this type of experimentation, that I end up with paintings like these. And here's another one that I've been working on recently. Very similar, kind of the same idea. Here are some smalls that I've been working on recently. Individual faces. Larger painting that I've been working on that's kind of based on the same approach. This is my process. This is what I do. So I'm just going to keep going here, see what I see. So I see like this starts to look to me, like I said, like a bird. And so I'll do things like this. Maybe create somewhat of a body. Not be afraid to go off the paper and push it out to the edges. This is almost starting to look like another face, another figure. And again, if I got a lot of curves going on, then I kind of offset that with maybe some straighter lines. I've looked at these things so many times in my sketchbook that I kind of remember, like I said, things that I've done in the past that maybe, I have to be careful with that. There are things that I know work well and things that I think are interesting, like, stuff like putting the mouth outside of the face, or maybe creating more than one mouth to a figure. Again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's one of those things where I've done it and it's been successful, and so I'll repeat it and try it again. But I don't want to get hung up on that where I force myself to do that every single time. Another thing I've done is like with shapes like this, kind of flipping them. Told you about how it looks like birds to me. I've done these things where I have, multiple shapes like that going sort of interweaving with each other. And so then you start to get almost like two birds in one, like the heads of those birds. Again, it's not really more complicated or deep than that. But I do think that the general feeling that I'm going for, this aesthetic, is that everything is connected. And so I will just really push that and make sure that even when I draw things, when it doesn't make sense at all, I'll still connect them. I'll connect dots, I'll create, things that look like hair, but also look like leaves. Even in an abstraction like this too, for whatever reason, I feel like I want to continue to put things in an order, meaning, this is kind of hard to articulate, but I tend to put like mountains or mountain shapes up near the top of the paper, or a sun or a moon or some other round, item up here. Again, when you're looking at this thing on a flat plane with all these lines and all the paint and stuff that goes into them, you don't necessarily see a landscape, or you don't necessarily see a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. But in my brain, it's like hard for me to sometimes get away from that. So I'll put things like, skies and mountain shapes in the background, and then I'll end up abstracting them anyway. So this mountain might end up turning into, a face. So it kind of serves the purpose of being a face and a mountain at the same time. So again, totally free form. Now the beak of this bird is the mouth of this face, which is kind of a mountain, right? I don't know. That's what I see. I can sort of enhance that with this kind of a feeling, and again, the way I paint it, if I were to paint this, the way I paint it might change the overall aesthetic and what you actually see. I feel like I'm rambling quite a lot, and like everybody else, I don't want to sound stupid, you know, I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about. But it feels like this stuff is pretty instinctual, and it's kind of easy, and it's one of those things that I feel like anybody can do it. You almost just have to give yourself permission to try, and not be afraid to take chances and make a weird drawing. You know, who cares, right? It's like, part of me feels like the only way I'm going to get to something interesting is if I just kind of let go and take chances. You know, and all the time I'm doing this, I look back at older paintings when I had a similar approach, and I can see my progress. I can see some things that were successful and some things I was doing then that I've kind of amplified and continued to evolve, and now it's in a better place. And so I have to hope and think that if I just keep doing the same process and just keep using my own intuition, that pretty soon this whole thing will evolve to another level, and all of a sudden I'll see things that I couldn't have imagined, right? I couldn't have foreseen at this point, but by repeating these habits and repeating this pattern and evolving this work, that I will eventually take it to a place that's much further down, just more interesting and better. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to complete this drawing really quick, and then I'm going to ink it in really quickly, and do a time lapse of that with some thick and thin lines. And what I think I'm going to do with this drawing is, if Jackie's up for it, I'm going to get her information and send her this drawing if she's interested in having it. Thank you for listening. Appreciate you guys. As always, enjoy the rest of the video, and see you next time.